Let me
Okay,
change that.
so it is done. I have hit the start streaming button, so I assume this means that my Twitch board is live. I checked it earlier. It was working okay. I'm going to go to the Twitch page, make sure that it's uploading. If I
It
see an
is.
advertisement, I know for a fact that we're up. It will take a moment.
Yeah, it is up.
Yeah, your video's loading.
Yep. Okay, so we are going to be live, boys. And this is going to happen. So, I'm going to wait for the ads to kind of play out for half a second because I don't know when people will come in. I also have this file stream save set up, so we do have the replay of it. I'm going to make sure. Okay, everything looks good. Cool. I can even like close Skype down, but as long as I minimize it with it maximized, if that makes any sense. The positions of everything is good. And we are ready to go. So hello there, all 5 of you on the Twitch stream, and hopefully so much more of you on the VOD watching this video. My name is CD-Mangaka. I am a Gold Pretend content creator, and we are here today to bring up and debut Gold Pretend's new weekly show, which is the boringly named Weekly Gold Pretend Article Panel, which we'll just short it to the Weekly Panel for short. We tried other such fun, fantastic names, such like Gossip per 10, Gold per 10 for your thoughts, CD-Mangaka's Ego Soother, which you can see why we would consider that given the overlay format with me lording over my guests. But we just settled for the weekly article panel, felt like it was the best name. It was a straightforward name to have. And the point of this show is to bring on Gold per 10 content creators, chosen by myself, which is a little bit arbitrary, but I looked at all the Gold per 10 articles, and I found the articles that I think would hold like the most discussion, either about aspects of the professional League of Legends scene or aspects of the game in terms of balance, in terms of meta, champion picks, things like that. And then I bring on the guests, and then we all go around and we discuss the articles. And to give like a sense of that, we'll go over my article first, the one that I wrote within this last week, my Gnar article, and then we'll move on to our guests, but let me go ahead and introduce in the bottom left corner as guest number 1. We have Gabriel Fernandez at TeeKhay Legends on Twitter. He wrote a fantastic article on the SK picks against Unicorns of Love, and he has a great theory about Kennen, which we'll get into later. So we'll go ahead and just show off the cool little overlay format and post him at the top. So say hi, TeeKhay. You are now lord of the conversation.
Hello. I'm also not Gabriel.
You're not, you're not TeeKhay.
Yeah, that would be me.
That would be you. Okay. So
Yeah.
gotta get the name straight. Sorry about that. So
You got my Twitter right.
Okay, the McGib did the SK article. This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's early morning. It's early
No.
morning. It's 9:37 for me, and
No,
I went to bed at 2.
The SK article.
Yeah, you wrote the SK. So hold on. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you did write the SK article. McGib did the ADC article, which we'll do. So there we go. We're gonna get it set up. I gotta get the names. It says you. I gotta remember who's who.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, anyway, so TeeKhay is now lord of the chat, and he did the SK article. Great job with that. Don't actually know his actual name, so...
Kevin.
Kevin?
Yeah.
Kevin, alright, yeah. I had a roommate named Kevin. He was phenomenal, so, alright. Questions for... Yeah, I even have it written in my notes. Questions for TeeKhay's SK, so I know who did what, but apparently, yeah. Okay, we did that, and now, the other guest, the official, the real Gabriel, ladies and gentlemen. So don't go after TeeKhay, he's an imposter. The real Gabriel, ladies and gentlemen, at TheMcGib, which not only is it a rejected name for a McDonald's sandwich, but also a great name for a professional Smash player, the McGib himself. We have Gabriel Fernandez and his wonderful article on the ADC meta, which we'll get into a little later. So McGib, you are now lord of the chat officially. So say hi.
All right, thanks. Hi.
Hi.
I don't really know what to say.
It's just like I woke up one morning and this quack messaged me on Skype like, yo, you want to be part of a webcast? And now I'm here. That's literally quite how it happened because I finally kicked it in gear. All right, I'm going to put myself back on top for right now. All right, so now I got it figured out, McGib and then TeeKhay. So anyways, the swap works really well. I think you guys can see the overlay now if you're looking at the Twitch stream.
Yeah.
They got me
Looks
up.
nice.
Yeah, no, and shout outs to Aaron Asher for making the overlay for me. I didn't collaborate with him at all, so when he sent me this, I'm like, wow, this is kind of like really a great self-promotion thing going on here. But then I figured out I could do the little camera swap trick, and I think it's a great addition, and I think it's going to be a pretty nice format. So, with all the introduction, all the little windy banner, as well as the embarrassment of not knowing who the hell is who out of the way, let's go ahead and kick off the show, and we're going to discuss my article first because this is my ego soother. And also because, just to establish the format and give the new guys an idea of how we can go about discussing the article. So, as well as for me to be the first one to be asked questions and grilled about, just to get these guys really comfortable. So, I did the Arn article on Go Pretend. I called it a Continental Gnar study. And this started off with the first week of the NALCS, when I noticed that Gnar kind of... Well, EU and NALCS. I know in EU, like in the very first game, he was completely ignored. And that was Elements versus Fnatic. He was completely ignored, neither picked nor banned. He went on to be picked... well, he went on to be ignored in 3 of those games. And then in day 2, or was it week 2? In day 2 of the first week, he went to 100% pick ban rate. He was not ignored at all. And I wanted to look at the different regions, and I decided to include China just because it would be a disgrace not to include such an important region. And look at who was playing him, who was winning with him, and you know, who are the players to watch for in the region, because it seemed like there was a difference in how effective teams were running with Gnar, which makes sense to have given that he is a very difficult champion to work with as a team, because you have to balance his passive and the transformation, because everyone loves the Mega Gnar, but the Mini Gnar is just kind of there. Mini Gnar is the lane bully, and then he becomes the Mega Gnar, which is the team fight god. And so I looked at the numbers. I just went into LOL Esportspedia, and I just looked at every single replay. Well, not replay. That would have been way too much time. I looked at every scoreboard, and I made a note of when he was picked, when he was banned, and when he was completely ignored, and then when he won. And in the chart, I defined the data. Like, I have a pick rate, a ban rate, and ignore rate. Because if you add the pick and ban rate, they don't equal 100, because I don't include games he was banned as a pick. And that's why I came up with the ignore rate, so when he was completely disregarded. And my findings were that Europe eventually got on the Gnar bandwagon, and they play him pretty well, actually. I had to refer to a couple to some of the Gulper chat people to look at who was a really good Gnar in Europe. NA, he kind of seems to be... I'd have to look at the stats now because they don't include stats from the 3rd week of LCS, only up to the 2nd week. And it seems like he has a little time struggling in NA, probably just because of lack of coordination, or the fact that it's a less competitive region and some of the lower level teams are getting Gnar, but they just don't field it well. There's some theory crafting behind that. China seems obsessed with Gnar, understandably so. He's been ignored in about 3 games out of the 72 that were played in China in the first 3 weeks. Also, take a moment to swallow that. There are 24 games in China played a week. That's rough. So he has a really high ban rate. He has the highest ban rate in China out of all of the regions. And he also has a pretty good win rate whenever he's let loose, at about a 50%. And I actually tweeted at Karen Moser, and she tweeted back at me to give me a couple of Gnar players and a couple of series to observe them in. So thank you, Karen, for the little reply back to me over the Twitters. And then Korea is a region I can really speak educated on because I've been watching it for a while. And Gnar has an interesting story there, where throughout the preseason, the first week, he had a really high ban rate, up at like just close to 100%. And then once week 2 led through, like the bans just evaporated, and teams were like, all right, we're ready to play against this guy now. And he's done really well there. There's not a lot of bad Gnar players there. Marin would probably be the worst of them, but he's still okay. It's nothing compared to his Rumble. But then you have like probably the 3 best Gnar players maybe in the world. I know you probably have the best one in the world, in the form of Smeb, who is just God on Gnar. It's just so beautiful to see that man play Gnar. As well as it is to see him in a cute little bunny outfit. Shout out to last week's GE's uniform. And with those findings, I kind of raised a couple of questions, but I never explored them fully, such as like, okay, is there a difference in the just, like, top lane meta picks? Which, if I don't get asked the question, I'll go ahead and address it because I have it in mind. As well as maybe just teams aren't really coordinated with it. For example, Cloud9, a team who I anticipated being strong at running Gnar, fielded it awfully, both in terms of how they played it as a team and as well as how Balls himself played it. So I don't know what to expect from other regions right now. With the pick, as well as contrasting who's playing what in the regions, that's a question I never explored with the article, though I thought about it, and I think that for a follow-up article or even an own unique article, that'd be worth asking. So that is the Gnar article itself across the regions, and so I'm going to open up to the floor And I'm going to let TeeKhay on my right and Gabriel on my left, McGib, go ahead, ask a couple questions that they had about it, and I'll do my best to answer. All right, so who wants it first, boys?
Okay. So to fully explore Gnar, I think we need to look at teams who don't play Gnar at all too, to see exactly how good he is. So on a world stage, how well do you think a team like CJ Entus, who doesn't play Gnar at all, could do against other regions who are playing Gnar fantastically? Like, what comes to mind is he can't play well against Smeb, so could he play well against Fredy122, who also plays Gnar at a high level? Like, could they succeed at all?
I think that they could succeed if they either had a cute counterpick to the Gnar, or if okay, when it comes to playing Gnar like internationally, we have to keep in mind like the regions. Okay, if you're playing in a region that just has a bunch of Gnars that are awful at the champion, and then suddenly you go to regions and you've never had to worry about Gnar, you've had ideas to play around him, but then you play against like a god tier region, okay? Say you play against, I'm going to use this example, like all you've played against is Cloud9's Gnar, and right now it's pretty bad. It could improve, I don't know yet, but say you played against that and then you're like, okay, you know how it works, you think you know how it works, you think you know how to play against it, and then you're up against Smeb, and then you're getting wrecked by it. You wouldn't succeed in that case. Whereas if you come from a region where you've been playing against that Smebs Gnar, and then you walk up and suddenly you're laying against like a Balls level Gnar, and I don't mean to rag on Cloud9 all that often. Balls is just the most iconic bad Gnar name right now I can think of. If you go from that, then you're going to crush at an international competition level. And I think what teams will do within that context is that Gnar will just become a ban that will eat it up. And that will limit what your team can do as far as the picks and bans goes, and that will free up the other team with a little more freedom. Like, Smeb just looks awesome on, like, every single champion. His Gnar is exceptionally amazing, but he just played Rumble into Gnar, and he actually did really well in the matchup, despite being camped in lane and like, feeding 2 kills. He still, like, played and outperformed the enemy Gnar, who did they play? It was Najin, so I can't... Was it Shy in top lane for Najin?
Duke.
Duke, thank you. Yeah, and Duke's, like, one of the, like, probably in...
He's probably the third best top laner in Korea.
Yeah, third best top laner, second or third best Gnar. It's between him and Trace, as far as that goes, and that was a discussion in the Go Pretend chat. But I think that would be the implications of how each region plays Gnar well. Would be if you come from a region where you don't know how to play Gnar yourself, or you've been around people who don't know how to play Gnar, you're going to have a hard time letting that ban go through to other teams that do know how to play Gnar really well. Whereas if you're on the other side of that spectrum, then it's just like pretty easy for you, and you can either reliably count on that champion being banned, so if you're dependent on it to win, you're in trouble. But if the enemy team lets it through because they're just not used to it, you're probably going to get a free win off of it. That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
All right, so next question.
Do you think because of the popularity of Gnar, he's almost certain to receive nerfs from Riot? Do you think that he will still be as much of a pick ban champion, especially in a region like China, post nerfs, because of his kit, or do you think it's just the raw statistics on his kit that he has right now that force him to be so picked and banned?
Okay, so just to clarify the question, you're asking, is it the nature of his kit and like what it provides that makes it like so powerful, or is it just overtuned? Is that
Yes.
like the basis of the question?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the...
All right, so I just want to clarify that, get out the bigger words, because this is a conversation you could have about Rek'Sai, actually, and I think that she is just overtuned at the moment, but she does give invaluable utility. But back to Gnar. I don't think he's strong just because he's overtuned. Because when you look at like what his team fight kit brings with that Mega Gnar, the sheer amount of disruption that it brings is immense to have. And although it kind of does pigeonhole or encourage your jungler to basically pick Jarvan, who happens also just be a really strong pick right now, regardless of Gnar's status, because he received a couple of buffs a while ago. Kha'Zix has been nerfed, Evelyn's been nerfed, Elise is just shit. Go Pretend announcement, stop picking Elise, you lose games. That's going to be my next article crusade, is don't pick Elise. Because I am pretty sure that she has a 0% win rate across every single region. I am pretty sure about that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, like, it's close to that, if not that itself. Every game I've seen her played, loss. She does nothing. So team, stop picking her. And
She's
this is
terrible in the meta.
Yeah, she's terrible in the meta, and she's just really weak overall. Meteos, you had a god like Narvin at IEM. Why did you not pick Narvin in the first week of LCS when you're up against TSM? I was waiting for it. You locked in Elise, and I cried. I'm like, no, you lost it. Anyways, going back to Gnar, I do better at reining in tangents than some of us. Going back to the Gnar pick, I think because his kit brings in so much to the team fights that he won't be he won't disappear from the meta, but he could probably slip from being like an over-dominating pick and there'd be such a pressure to play him. The thing with Gnar that makes him difficult to balance, but also within that context makes him a really great stable pick, is the fact that he has such a weird difficulty curve to him and power spikes. Because I'll phrase it like this: if Gnar only existed as Mega Gnar, he would need nerfs. His numbers as he were just in Mega Gnar are probably overtuned, and if he had that form constantly and always had that constant engaged threat, nerfs. But because his team fight comes from that Mega Gnar and it lasts so little, not so long, it's pretty short. Right now I think the cooldown on when you can transform to Gnar, when you could build Fury again, is like 15 seconds, 13, 15 seconds. I know on PB they just shifted the value to one of those two. And then you stay transformed as Gnar. Right now it was actually like bugged or something, I think, to where it was lasting like 20 seconds. Whereas the tooltip said you stay in that form for 15, and I think on PB there was a note of they're finally making it that 15. So you have 15 seconds of that godlike team fight to work with. And you have to build it up, and you have to time it, and there's like these 30-second cycles of when you have access to that form and not, and when you have to build it up. And I think a key to counterplaying around Gnar is, okay, when his Mega Gnar is down and you can't build up Fury, you force a fight. Like, that's your time to do it, because you don't have to worry about that disruption. Because there is that skill cap to him, the only reason I think Gnar would not be played after nerfs is if, globally speaking, every single team got so good at playing Gnar and he was so strong with that he would have to be nerfed all across the board. Kind of like the case with Yasuo and Zed and Azir that we're seeing now, is that after all like the little bug fixes coming in and after all the like the buffs, like, okay, we want him to do really well, that suddenly he's just over dominatingly powerful, and okay, now we need to nerf him because everyone's figured him out. I think that's the case that we have the approach to with Gnar, but I don't see that happening within every region. I'd say in Korea and possibly China, that would be a justifiable case. Don't know about EU yet. It's a young region, but they seem to be grasping it. NA, long way to go before that would be a relevant conversation point, but perhaps they would even stop playing Gnar together if he was nerfed. But to summarize my whole point, I think that because of the nature of his kit, that even if he did get nerfs, he'd still be played, and the only way for him to be nerfed so badly that he effectively would be Season 3 Olaf, would be for everyone to be so good with Gnar, which I don't see happening just because of how coordinated a team has to be around Gnar. So that's my summation.
And they not only do they need to be coordinated around as a team, but the individual player needs to be able to manipulate his Fury or Mega Gnar bar really well.
Gumption? I think Doa wanted to call it gumption.
Yeah, whatever we call it.
Right.
But it's you have to have the combination of the two. So it's on the individual player at first, but if you can't have one or the other,
Yeah.
if a team is coordinated but they can't manage the Mega Gnar bar, then it's pretty useless. And if the team is not coordinated, then you're going to have random Gnar ults that people are going to be like, why didn't you follow up? Or just lead the fights.
Yeah, that's the interesting part of his kit, is that there's such a high solo skill player cap and a high team coordination cap to him, which I think makes him difficult to balance, but also like unneeding a balance in a way. That said, we'll see if nerfs do come in. We're seeing some adjustments to his passive and his transformation on the PBE, so we'll see if that plays out. I'm interested to see it and how teams adapt to it. All right, so next question. I think TeeKhay, it's your turn.
Okay, so we're seeing his ignore rate go up a little bit across every region. I was curious on if you had a theory of why.
Ignore it. Okay, so I could probably explain it. Um, Globally speaking, and like the basic summary of this is that um, I'll use Korea as a microcosm example. So for me, when I say microcosm, I mean small world. So with that, I think Korea kind of tells the narrative of every single region as far as how this theory applies to that. So as far as the ignore rate going up goes, I think that everyone had this reaction to Gnar at first where, holy crap, that's a really strong kit. We don't know how to play against that, but we also need time to master it, so we don't know how to play with it. And so we saw a really high pick ban rate. Throughout the entire Korean preseason, he had close to 100% ban rate. And we saw that be really high as well in the first week of the LCK. But then Korea, had players like Smeb, Trace, and Duke, like master Gnar and figure them out. And teams also like learn how to play against the Gnar, such as the case with like SKT's Marin. Whenever he played Gnar, people seemed to play around that really well. And go through the matchups, lane swap it. They got a feel for how Gnar worked at a point. And so with that ignore rate going up in some games, there are some teams. He's gone from this scary new pick that could be overpowering to kind of just like the pick of the day, really. And as teams begin to learn who to pick and ban it from, there's some games entirely where both sides go, hey, we know we both don't play Gnar, so we're not going to even bother with him. We're going to do our own thing. SKT has had a couple series like that, and their story is really telling. They played CJ Entis in the first week, and Marin played Gnar, and it was a really unimpressive Gnar. And then the
Yeah.
next pick and ban phase, CJ Entis and SKT both left it up. And the picks went over to SKT, and they hovered over Gnar. But then they didn't pick it because they said, okay, we can't play Gnar at the level that we need to win this series, so we're just not going to even pick it right now. And then CJ Entis not playing Gnar themselves, as of now and as of then, I think they don't play it now.
Shy has said before that he just does not like the champion and he won't ever pick it up.
Okay, so thank you. Interviews is something that escapes me. But
Yeah.
with those two establishing that, suddenly Gnar becomes okay. We don't have to worry about Gnar because it goes back to can the team and the player play him well enough to make him a power pick. Teams in Korea are starting to realize now that okay, against GE Tigers you ban Gnar. You don't want Smed to have that thing. It's just too glorious to see him on that. And also, in the case of Korea, I want to point this out. Korea is a special case because not every team plays every week. Every team does. Every team does, but two teams play twice.
Yes.
Two
Whoever
teams
plays
play.
on the first day plays on the last day too.
Yep. So there'll be teams who play twice in there, and depending on who those teams are, you'll see a fluctuation in our picks. For example, if you have CJ Entis playing twice, you're going to probably see a dip in Gnar's play. Whereas if you see GE Tigers play, you're going to see an increase in Gnar's pick and ban. So there's that region. In China, again, the ignore rate is really fairly low. And I don't know the context as to why he was ignored in those games. So I don't follow the scene well enough to answer that. And I think the story in NA is that he was on the bandwagon hype train. Like, all right, everyone's going to play him. And then it's like, oh, crap, we can't play him. Oh, they can't play him either.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't care anymore. Well, all right, okay, we're Gnar free, man. All right, no Gnar zone. This is a no Gnar zone. I think C9's picks and bans foretold it really well. Game 1, they picked him. Game 2, they banned him. So, there's that. And then Balls played Cyan, and he did okay with it. Cyan's so much fun. I think that's the story of it. In Europe, I don't know the narrative so much because it was interesting that he was ignored in 3 games in day 1, and then in week 1, I think, and then he was not ignored at all. Like everyone was picking and or banning him, as strong top laners were debuting him over in Europe.
Yeah.
So that's my insight as to why Gnar's ignore rate gets creased. It's and why it fluctuates is that as teams begin to figure out who can play Gnar and who can't, when you get a matchup of 2 teams who can't play Gnar, there's just both this unspoken agreement of we don't even give a shit. Gnar doesn't exist. So that's my interpretation of why the ignore rate increases as teams and players get used to him and they know how to play against him, and as we discover who can't play him, and so we just don't even care. Okay, so I think we'll open up for one more question because TeeKhay's done 2, and this will be McGibs second, and then we'll move on to the conversation.
All right. So, do you think that with the decreasing ban rate and the increasing ignore rate, that Gnar will continue to be one of the valuable first picks, or do you think that other champions such as Lissandra will outshine him as a first pickup for teams?
Contextually speaking, I think it will vary. For teams like GE Tigers who have like mastered Gnar, I think he'll stay at that first pick. For teams that are a little shakier on Gnar, I think he won't be that first priority pick, and we've seen that a couple of times, as well as like what other teams can play. For example, if there was one pick ban phase I remember that went really well that GE Tigers was able to trick the other team into picking up Lee Sin. I think it was Watch. Watch was the player who grabbed that in that game, so I can't recall which team he plays for. Was it Najin?
Najin.
Okay, yeah.
Najin.
Yeah, I think this was in the preseason or in the first. Yeah, it had to be preseason. They banned out like his junglers, and he felt uncomfortable, so he first picked Lee Sin. And then GE Tigers, I think they grabbed both Gnar and Jarvan, or Lissandra and Jarvan, or Lissandra and Gnar, one of those combinations. But like they target banned him, and they made him worry about that. So I think if you mind game it like that, yeah. But overall global theory. I think as teams learn to play around Gnar, and as like picks come up with it, that he won't be that like super first priority pick just because like for example Janna, I don't know what's going on with like Europe and NA right now. They seem to forget that Janna exists, whereas Korea is still in love with her because she plays really well in those huge team fighting comps. She is still a really good first pick, and she's a safer first pick within those regions. And if your team can't run Gnar, you won't prioritize it. Instead, you could probably pick up the Lissandra as a flex pick, for example. And if some kind of counter pick exists to Gnar, then he could fall from that pick ban phase, because if there's a laner that absolutely wrecks him, then that would slip through. Which I'll segue into this point. One of the things that I thought about doing for the article was looking at Gnar's Irelia matchup. Because here's the interesting thing. In America, and I don't know, I contextualize it like this, I don't know if it's just because NA players are more experienced with Irelia and they know how to play her more and they're just haven't grasped Gnar yet, or if there's actually something to the matchup. Irelia seems to just beat the shit out of Gnar in lane. And talking and looking at a couple of other like community guides and stuff like that, that seems to be consensus that once Irelia gets level 4, the lane goes in her favor with her harassing mini Gnar. And in Korea, interestingly enough, in Korea, Irelia has been played once out of all their games. No one plays Irelia in Korea. And it's interesting that happens because Gnar is so prevalent in Korea. I think China has some Irelia players.
China has a lot of Irelia. Flame and Acorn come to mind as playing a lot of Irelia lately.
Yeah, and so that tells an interesting story of, but Gnar is still close to 0%, like ignored rate, banned, picked, all that stuff. And there seems to be a semi-trend in EU where when Irelia is banned, Gnar gets picked up, but that's probably more related to that guy's a really good Irelia player, and then that guy just picks up Gnar after his Irelia is banned. And NA, I think it's whatever. So if Irelia shows up to be a really good Gnar counter, I think Gnar could slip from a first pick if globally teams pick her up and play her really well in the matchup. If Gnar gets nerfed badly, he'll drop from a first pick priority until like those champions get nerfed, things like that. If a team can only win with Gnar, that's like the case I can see him being that super heavy first pick. And the thing with grabbing Gnar is it depends on the power picks that are open. I think he's first pick worthy, but I can understand him going to a second or third pick phase, depending on what the teams want. That's my answer to that. Okay, so that's going to conclude my article section. We ran that for about 10 minutes, something like that. So that's a good time.
Something like that.
Yeah, something close to that. All right, so I got a timer now, and we're going to move on to the McGib and his article, since I have him labeled as guest 1, so now he's Lord of the Chat. So McGib, let's go ahead and get into your ADC article. So go ahead.
All right.
Talk.
So my article has got a plain title, just Top Competitive ADCs. And the reason I wrote it is because a lot of people, especially if they're new to the competitive scene, they they just know solo queue, so they don't know how champions transition very well and which champions are prioritized and competitive but not prioritized in solo queue. So I wanted to write about champions that I think should be prioritized by teams. And so the 5 champions that I came up with were Kalista, Caitlyn, Sivir, Graves, and Corki. And the way I came up with those is that I looked at each ADC and their kit, and then I looked at the pick bans from mostly NA and EU LCS, but also OGN. And that's how I came up with it. So, do either of you guys have any questions about, especially my choice of champions, or?
Yeah, I have some, but TeeKhay, do you have any to start?
Yeah. For your niche pick, you picked Twitch. I love Twitch. He's one of my favorite champions. I agree that he should be played more. Would you say that Twitch is a better pick than the Ezrael that we're only really seeing a couple games in Korea? And if so, why?
Well, I don't necessarily think he's a better or a worse. I just think he's very much of a niche pick, which is why I picked him to be that. But the reason why is because he's such a good teamfight ADC. Like, especially with the popularity of Narvin right now, if you get like a 3-man Narvin ult into a Twitch spray and pray, and it should absolutely decimate a team, whether it's the 3-man is the front line or the back line. But I think Ezrael is more of a team saying, we're not entirely sure what is best here, so we're just going to pick up a safe pick. It does reliable damage throughout the entire game, and he just works well with every comp. Ezreal's just very versatile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on my point of Twitch, so this is a counterpoint, not necessarily a question. I think that we don't see a lot of Twitch just because he's probably a little undertuned. I did an article on ADCs in Korea, and Ezrael and Tristana were 2 ADCs who did really well in Korea. Like, Ezrael had like a 9 KDA in Korea, and he was posting like double-digit scores in like all of his games. And Tristana was doing really well as well. So I'll segue that into my question. When Twitch was played, he was played about 3 times. He only picked up 1 win. And I think that a reason why we don't see Twitch right now within the meta, even though that in theory, like you said, he would work great with a Jarvan-Narvan lockdown combo. I think the thing is that teams could also play against that, as well as that his laning phase against like some of the popular ADCs right now is just too weak to get away with it. Even though if you lane swap it, he should do okay. But if you don't get that lane swap, you're probably going to be in for a really rough time. And there also might be just like there's not a whole lot of Twitch players that are interested in playing him. And as far as teamfight ADCs goes, I think that Sivir just brings more because she actually enables the Gnar and Jarvan combo with her ultimate rather than follow up with it. That's my counterpoint. So my question then, to segue right off of TeeKhay's actually, is was there a particular reason that you didn't also list Tristana as a pick? Because we actually see her quite often in competitive play, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm interested to see if it is the one I'm thinking of. So is there a reason that you didn't list Tristana in there as well, even in your honorable mentions? Because we have seen her play, and if you look across the board, she actually does really well. In I know Korea she does well, not sure about how she does in NA.
Well, the reason I didn't list Tristana on there is primarily because she just got reworked, so I wasn't entirely sure.
Called it.
Yeah, yeah.
Called
that was like, we don't know if she's undertuned right now, but from what the rework looks like, it looks like they evened out her power curve and made her mid game a lot better, which I think is
that's gonna help her.
Yeah, it'll help her out a lot.
I did an article on Tristana. I am all about the rework hype. And then they did something interesting with it. They actually nerfed her range, which actually reduces her safety. And I'll contextualize it like this. At max rank, max level with Tristana, she outranges Caitlyn by 15. That's it. That's sad from what she was before.
Yeah, compared to, it was, what, 60 before or something?
It was about 60, yeah. She lost about 38 range. 38 to 40.
Yeah, and that just makes her an entirely different pick now, because before she was picked for, we need a hyper carry late game who's going to stay safe. Tristana Tristana is still very safe. She still has the rocket jump to escape, and she has her ultimate to displace the front line charging at her. But it's not entirely. One of the reasons her gigantic auto attack range late game was so good is because she could siege towers without getting very close to it. And so I just think, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure how the rework is going to turn out. I think it's going to turn out favorable for her.
I agree.
But I think for now, especially because a lot of teams, whenever a certain champion gets reworked or tuned, it takes a while for them to practice with that champion and truly learn how good that champion is. Like a notable example would be Azir. Upon release, nobody really played him because they weren't entirely sure how to go about him.
And he was buggy as hell.
Yeah, that too.
He had a locust infection from the
start.
It's like it's like the Mummy movies.
I definitely think though, as time goes on, Tristana will be picked up a lot more. But I think that as it is right now, Tristana just isn't going to be seen as much or advertised as much.
Yeah, she's also disabled in the anime right now, so we won't see her for a little bit. But yeah, Sneaky was playing her in solo queue, and he was doing really well with her, actually. And I do think that I'll be interested to see, just because they actually nerfed one of the aspects of her late game with the range nerfs, as well as they cut her attack speed per level in half again. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but I think that teams will pick her up because she can do like 800 damage to a freaking tower.
Yeah, she's still the safest late game hyper carry.
Yeah, and
if you think hyper carries, you think Vayne, Kog'Maw, and Vayne gets jumped on as soon as she appears late game. Kog'Maw is basically a slightly mobile turret. Like, if he doesn't have flash, he's going to die.
Tristana has really good peel for herself, yeah. And I think that her damage late game will actually be stronger, though less safe with her E. So
yeah.
Anyways, okay, TeeKhay, your turn for a question.
Okay, so I'm going to start this off by saying I love Kalista, and I agree with you that she's probably the strongest AD carry right now. So why do you think she's struggling in every single region that's not North America?
Well, she's doing well now in Korea. She's picked up wins, finally.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was because of the Kalista pick, though.
That's fair.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Kalista is that and it's also the reason she's good, is just she's so unique. Like, she's not, her focus is not necessarily, she's not a late game hyper carry. She's not a early game, like, smash you in the face like Graves, and she's not a burst like Graves or Jinx. I haven't actually played her, but from what I've heard, her passive can feel very unusual to work with. So it's similar to Gnar in that it requires a lot of individual player skill, but it also requires a lot of team coordination. And so I believe her strengths come from her rend and her ult particularly. And so in order for her to use her rend to the utmost, is she has to auto attack a lot. So you have to be able to put yourself in the position as a team where you're taking dragon and you're going up against the chance that you're going to get outsmited. And so you need to know exactly how much damage Rend is going to do so that you and your jungler can coordinate, and so that there isn't even a chance for the enemy jungler to outsmite. And I think that's what makes her strong, but on the flip side, if you mess that up, then you're going to get outsmited, and the whole point of Kalista's Rend being ridiculously strong is nullified.
Yeah.
And the other reason why I think Kalista was strong is that even though 1v2s seems to be the current standard meta, she's extremely good in 2v2s. Her W at level 1 does 12% of a target's max HP every 8 seconds or something like that.
They
6?
They buffed that. That was
6, which is, in a 2v2 lane, every 6 seconds to lose 12% of your max health, it's just ridiculous. Like, she just smashes people. And that's why I think she'll be strong.
Right. And she seemed to pick up steam now with the 5.1 changes. I speak namely
Yeah.
Irelia, and we're seeing success with her Runan build, but we're also seeing success with her Infinity Edge build, like the standard ADC build. And that's a whole other conversation point that focuses more on Kalista. So I'm going to pull away from that just to look at the article as a whole. Because if it was just a Kalista article, I'd go in and like compare builds and stuff like that. But I might do that myself in my own article because
Yeah.
I hate the Runan's
Kalista
build.
is very interesting to write about.
Yeah, I hate the Runan's build with a fiery passion of 1,000 burning suns, but I see why it works and I know why it's strong and I understand that it can exist. So,
Yeah.
my next question then. Was there a particular order with your listing of the ADCs? Like, is the order that you present them in the article like Kalista's one, and then whoever was second, Sivir was two, Caitlyn was second, which also, like, I don't see a whole lot of Caitlyn played, so I think it's interesting that you put her up there, but I understand why. Was that the order for you? Like, if you had to put a top 5 list, that's how you'd rank them? Yes or no to that? And then, if no, how would you rank the ADCs in terms of priority picks?
Yeah. Generally, I'd say yes. However, each of the 5 AD carries on the list does something different for a team. They fit into, and because of that, they have to have a specific team comp to excel. Like, you can't really pick Caitlyn into an all-in comp and then expect her to do as well as, say, Graves. And so, because of that, generally, yes, I expect Kalista, Caitlyn, and Sivir to be picked more than Corki, and definitely more than Twitch. But yeah, I generally think that they go in the order Kalista, Caitlyn, Sivir, Graves, Corki. Simply because Corki and Graves tend to have more issues than, say, Sivir.
Okay. Although, is there like a counter picking meta within those ADC picks as well? Like, if like, this ADC was picked, you wouldn't pick this ADC?
Yeah, somewhat. We know that when Graves had the huge revival and he was being picked almost every game, Sivir came out as doing fairly well versus him because she can clear waves just as quickly as he can, and she can block either his ult or his buckshot with her spell shield. But it's because of all the 1v2s, it's not as important, I'd say, simply because it's very rare for 2 AD carries to be going at each other right now.
Although
So
it happens on occasion, yeah. I bring that up just because the consensus that I've heard is that Graves just counters Kalista in terms of power spike goes. Like, his mid game is really strong up against Kalista's little bit of a dip as she's getting the item that she needs. And actually over in Europe, where Graves is like the #1 ADC pick, we don't see a lot of Kalista. And I think it's because of that. I'd have to look at how many have been banned as well, things like that. But I remember there was a game, I think in Korea, where somebody played Graves into Kalista. Or maybe
I don't think Graves has been played once in Korea.
No, he hasn't been played since preseason. No, it was a different region. I think it was Europe. Someone played Kalista.
Yeah, I think it was Europe.
I think it was Europe. There was a rumble on the Graves' team, and then they just, like, freaking sniped her. It was the team comp had anti-support, Graves ADC, rumble top.
Oh, yeah, that's brutal for Kalista.
Yeah, because the team comp was brutal. Aside from the Graves, But Graves comboed really well, so...
Yeah. The thing with Kalista that makes her really good in team fights is that she's really hard to lock down because of her passive. But if you can just nullify her passive, like with the Graves buckshot ultimate combo, she's going to die if she stands still for all of 1 or 2 seconds. And so if you like you said, the comp had Annie with it. If she gets ulted by Annie or she gets stunned by Annie in any way, she's locked down and she's standing still, and a standing still Kalista is not what you want as a Kalista.
Right.
So, yeah, as Kalista's popularity rises, we might actually see more Graves because of that, because of how much upfront damage he puts out.
Right. Okay. All right. So last set of questions from TeeKhay and myself. TeeKhay, do you have another one?
Okay. So out of the 80 carries you picked, only 2 of them are being consistently played in Korea, being Sivir and Corki. Why do you think the Graves, Caitlyn, and Kalista aren't being played as much? Kalista's getting some games, but not a whole ton.
Just in Korea, you mean?
Just in Korea
Okay.
exclusively.
Okay, well, I want to preface this saying I'm not the most comfortable with the Korean region.
Okay.
I haven't actually been able to watch most of their games. But the reason why is because their style, Sivir and Corki just fits their style very well. Their games seem to be a lot closer, generally speaking. Like, they punish mistakes more than other regions. And so Sivir and Corki are very good at that. Like, Corki with Triforce, if a team is out of position, he takes towers so quickly. And Sivir is just the ultimate AD carry for punishing mispositioning and punishing mistakes. Because of her ultimate, it just means you're gonna get engaged on if you're mispositioned. And you can't really. And also, in the Korean scene, there's a lot of priority on mid and top laners excelling over AD carries, it seems like, because you think the most iconic example would be Faker. Even with the removal of DFG, he still is capable of catching AD carries out, and so Corki and Sivir are a lot harder, do well against players like Faker who just want to kill the AD carry and then get out, with champions like LeBlanc, for example.
Okay.
Okay, so then my final question, bit of a nitpick one, because I read this. You mentioned that Corki has a weakness with his short range. What did you mean by that?
Well, his auto attack range is about the same as Graves, which means that like late game and in team fights, he has to get pretty up close. And he does have Valkyrie. However, like Valkyrie can be interrupted, and it does have somewhat of a long cast time. And so, although the rockets from his ultimate do provide good poke, the vast majority of AD carry damage comes from auto attacks. And for him to get auto attacks in late game, he has to get up close. And that leads to, like, what about Graves? Well, Graves does have the same range as Corki, I believe. However, he has a passive that gives him 30 armor and 30 magic resist. So he does much better in close range brawls. But yeah, that's why Corki is very much of a mid-game monster, because short attack ranges aren't punished as much in the mid-game as they are in the late game. Like, you think Graves again, or Lucian, they're known for their mid-games, and that's because teams have more issues closing in and instantly killing an AD carry when they're closer than they should be.
Right. The reason I ask you that is actually Corki's ADC range is average. Graves is 525. Corki is 550. Sivir is 500. And 550 is the average. Kalista has 550 range. Caitlyn has 650. That's above average. I think Ezrael has 550. But Corki sits right there at that 550 mark. So when you brought up that point of the auto attacks, I'm like, but wait, he has like the average range. Like Twitch without ultimate has 550 range. Other season list.
Yeah, the thing is,
yeah, but
his
if you mean
escape
spell
is
range,
just not as good.
Yeah.
His escape just is not as good as all the other average AD carries. Like Ezreal, it has the same range, but his E is just, it's up more often, and it's just a better escape overall. Kalista has her passive to outmaneuver.
Consistent range, yeah. Well, hubs. Yeah, so I had to bring that point up because it seemed like there was like a confusion, like, okay, like, is it a mobility thing? Because while Valkyrie does have a really good range, Ezreal's Arcane Shift has like 400 range. Valkyrie has 800.
Yeah,
so
if you think of like the Thresh Corki matchup, it shows you why the Valkyrie is not as good. If the Thresh player waits half a second to predict the Corki's Valk, then he just flays Corki out of the Valkyrie, and then what? He has to flash, or if he doesn't have flash, then he's done.
Right.
And that's why he has issues, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So that's my one question. All right, that's going to conclude this final segment. I finally looked at the Twitch chat. We got a couple viewers in there, guys. Apparently my microphone needs to be turned up. That's always been an issue, but heck, that's the first time in my life I've been told to speak up rather than, wow, dude, get quiet. So, all right, let me do this. I'm going to adjust it a little bit. Hopefully that's just a smidge better. I hope you guys are hearing me okay. I don't know how it's going to the stream. It's coming up on that.
I hear you fine.
Yeah, I imagine that you guys have it okay, but my recording thing is a little off. Anyway, so we're going to move on to the last article of the show, and that is going to be TeeKhay's article on SK, and also Guilty Confession. The reason, a big reason, and my excuse now for why I confuse the names is that I had both of you guys listed as TeeKhay in my notes. So I'm like, wait, that's not McGib. That's what happened.
Issue.
I'm like, ugh. So, anyways, don't mind me. I'm a fool.
Do I get to be on top now? Oh.
Yes, you get to be on top. It's all yours.
That's what I've always dreamed of.
Yes.
Okay,
I am the
so
bottom bitch.
I think pick and ban is the most interesting part of League of Legends. I study it a lot. I watch 4 regions at least the pick and ban of every game. And I try to look for things that I find to be different or might change the meta globally when I try to write about an article. So I thought this game was really interesting. Like, I'm naturally drawn to Unicorns of Love because they do interesting things with their pick and ban. It's not always great, but it's usually at least something to think about. And this is the first time that I've seen anyone play Kennen, let alone into the Narvan. So that had me thinking, like, during the pick ban, conceptually how that would work. And then they played it out as perfectly as they possibly could, with Fredy stopping Vizixachi at almost every turn. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. So
it's
feel
just
free to
like,
ask
it was a game that inspired it. Yeah. All right. So
Yeah.
I'll kick off the conversation with a question. A little bit more of an editorial one on my part, so you have to excuse me for this one. But in your article, and with how you just talked about it there, it kind of seemed like you just like did all the thinking in the pick and ban phase, and then you went to write the article without looking at the game. And even in your article, you said even if we ignored the game.
Yeah.
So my main question now is, because it seemed like when I watched the game, it supported your argument like pretty much full-heartedly, although there's some other things to consider. Why didn't you like bring up specific examples within the game? Was it a formatting thing with the Go Pretend thing? Was it just
It's what I like to write about. I think that even outside the game, like a lot of times the casters specifically will say something like they won at Champ Select, and I always thought about what that meant. So I went through and I tried to write it in as though the pick ban is the entirety of the game.
Okay.
So you can actually tell who won at pick ban. That's what I try to do.
Okay.
Like, in the future, I might write about teams that lost the game overall, but had a stronger pick ban phase. So I think that's more of a stylistic choice.
Okay.
Just because of how I think about it.
All right. Yeah, I was curious about that, just because. Like, I know it's a bitch to embed videos in Go Pretend and get the time right, because you basically almost have to do just hyperlink at that point and send.
Yeah, I've had to do it before.
Yeah. So I was curious as if you just were like, you know what, I'm not gonna mess with that, or if there was something else to it, and it looks like there was something else. So I was curious about that, and all right. Okay, so McGib's turn.
All right. So at around, I wanna touch on the Kennen versus the Gnar and the J4. You said that the Kennen would do very well because of his ultimate, and because the Narvan combo forces people to be close, and so if Kennen gets his ult off before he gets stunned, then everybody around him is going to be stunned. However, 25 minutes into the game, there was a point in which Fredy was caught out, and he didn't actually get his ult off. So do you think
it was actually
that...
on cooldown? That's why.
Oh, it was on cooldown?
It was. I looked.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I pulled up the video just in case.
It was on cooldown.
Do you believe that what Unicorns of Love should have done in response to this sort of niche counterpick, that they should have tried to catch Fredy out more, or do you think that they should have just tried to catch other champions out?
Okay, I think Fredy needed to be completely removed from every team fight. So they had 2 options. They could either try to bait a fake team fight and like try to get him to blow his ult, or they could try to burst him down and get his Zonias. Either one would have kind of stopped what happened from working. But instead of that, they just kept trying to teamfight them. So I think they should have focused the Kennen almost entirely. That was the main point of SK's composition. They couldn't do anything without the Kennen. Like, they can get a pick maybe with the Casta and Blitzcrank and the Graves, but they're not going to be able to teamfight effectively at all. So they need that Kennen removed. That's goal number 1.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I want to back this up by saying we actually did see them get a pick onto the Kennen and start it off. Near the end of the game at 36 minutes, 35 seconds game time, they had a team fight there, and they engaged on the Kennen, and they took him to a fifth of his HP before he used his Zonias, and he didn't have his ult up. When he came out of it, he got his ult off for about a second. But at that point in the game, SK was so far ahead, it didn't matter.
Yeah, they had like a 7K gold lead and 4 dragons.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And also, I want to point this out with that composition and the weakness with Kennen is, like you just said, the ultimate is pretty reliant. That's like, if you don't have that, you're done. And Kennen's ultimate cooldown is a flat 2 minutes. Jarvan's and Gnar's starts off at 2 minutes, but they scale down to 80 seconds and 90 seconds. And so as the game goes on, there's this 30-second window of we have our ults, he doesn't.
Yeah. And I think beyond the ultimate, it's also the Zonias is 100% necessary on Kennen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when that's down, he can't do anything.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so it's my question now? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who said what and why we did that. Yeah, so I felt like chiming in on that one just because gameplay is always interesting to me. So, so we actually hit up a couple of them, like weaknesses with it. Okay, and I got another question. I'll save that one. Okay, so we have to address this one, and we talked about this before we started this stream, but and we've already addressed it in a way, but was the Kennen pick just more effective in this game than it could have been or should have been, based on how Unicorns of Love played it? Because several times throughout the game, they walked into it. In fact, the very first gank up top, where Kikas came in on Kennen, he locked him in his ultimate, and then Vizicachi stood right outside the Cataclysm to keep auto-attacking Fredy. And Maelstrom, one thing that makes the Kennen pick strong into that Narvan combo is that his ultimate just like barely outranges the Cataclysm. So even if you're trapped in it, you can get the damage out. But then Vizicachi, like, he freaking flashed into the Cataclysm pit, like went further in to the Maelstrom while he was still mini-Gnar. He wasn't going Mega anytime soon. And then, so there was that case. And then, like, throughout the game consistently, like, I saw 4 members of Unicorns of Love. Let me look. At 21 minutes, that team fight in the top lane, 4 members, all the carries, walked into Kennen Ultimate to get chunked by it. Did Unicorns of Love's play enable the Kennen pick to work more so? And the next question, if they counterplayed it correctly, do you think that Unicorns of Love could have won the game?
Okay, so Unicorns of Love misplayed that game pretty terribly too. Like, I can't even pretend that it was just SK playing well. SK did play great, but Unicorns of Love made a ton of mistakes that game. Conceptually, I still would argue that the Kennen is a really good pick into that as long as he plays right. They were doing a good job of trying to send people up to him, but they didn't do it correctly. Like, the execution was terrible. So, I don't know. If Unicorns of Love had played that slightly better, maybe they could have pulled off their combo better. But I still think Kennen's strong. I would need a bigger sample size of data because we've only seen Kennen once this entire season. So, only time will tell, but I think it's really strong into Narvan.
We've seen him once played by what is perhaps the best Western team up against the overhyped, does not deserve to be ranked number 16 team in the world, hype train that has been debunked after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I had to throw that out.
No, I agree. They're a top 6 team in Europe. I don't want to rate much higher than that right now.
Yeah. Okay, so McGib, your question.
All right. So I want to touch on the Jinx pick.
Yeah.
Do you think that they're prioritizing Jinx over a mid laner or a support? Or no, Thresh was already picked, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you think that them picking Jinx over a mid laner was the right thing? And if not, what champion do you think they should have picked, and what AD carry do you think they should have picked with that?
Okay, so at that point in the game, I think what they wanted to do was pick the Syndra, and they wanted to make sure it was as safe as possible, and they didn't know exactly where that Caston was going to go. So rather than pick in and then have something counterpick the Syndra, I think they wouldn't have an AD carry picked. That being said, I think Jinx is rarely the right choice when you don't know what the support you're going up against is, or exactly what the other team's comp is. So I think Corki would have been stronger, particularly because he can get that poke down and maybe poke down Kennen a little bit before the fight starts. Make that riskier. I rarely think Jinx is the right choice just because of how immobile she is. So.
Yeah, I like the Corki pickup too, especially since he puts out magic damage with his poke.
Yeah.
And Kennen wants to itemize armor in that comp. I agree with that.
Yeah. Plus, he's guaranteed to land his phosphorus bomb with the Narvin combo. And if he has a big one up, then that's a lot of damage in a small AoE.
Yeah, and I get what they were trying to do with the Jinx. They wanted to do the same kind of thing where they got the Super Mega Death Rocket into a bunch of people in the Narvin combo. I think that's what they were going for there. But the success of that relies on Jinx being fed and being able to do the damage with her Super Mega Death Rocket. And against a team comp where at that point they just had Rek'Sai, Graves, and Kassadin, you don't know what you're playing into. So you don't know if you're going to be able to play safe and get that fed. So I don't agree with the pick at all.
Okay. So I have one last question listed. Unfortunately, I feel like questions run short with like these single game articles, just because it's like, okay, we have asked everything about the article when there's only so much to discuss. But I do have one that's a little more of an overarching question, and it kind of ties back into my point earlier during my Gnar article, the pen boys and girls I'm conducting, with the So my question on this one, is that Kennen seems to be like a viable counterpick, but he does have his weaknesses when it comes to playing as a team with him, but he seems to do well against a Narvin team. I love that word, Narvin. It just sums everything up. So my question, though, is this, and it kind of like segues into another hypothetical, and it's my last question. And Gabe still has one more question. What do you think of the Irelia matchup against Gnar? Like, your personal thoughts on it. I voiced mine earlier in the cast, but I want to know yours. And the reason why I asked this, it seems like she's capable of keeping Gnar in check during the laning phase consistently. And she's able to be more consistently reliable than Kennen is because she's not tied to this 2-minute cooldown spell to do the one thing that she can do in team fights. Irelia just exists in team fights, and she is able to hop onto carries. She's able to put out damage and soak it up.
I think it should be noted that Irelia was actually banned in this game by SK.
Right.
It was.
Yeah, it was banned in that
by
one.
SK.
So the question does revolve around why didn't SK pick Irelia instead, but let's see. She's not reliable. Yeah, in regions where she's played, Gnar seems to have a little bit of a gimp process to him. So would you see it more so that people would pick up Irelia first and play that over the Kennen with that? Because of how the matchup plays.
Okay. I think this is more of a team-specific thing where Fredy 122 just... I haven't seen him play Irelia in a while. I don't know how comfortable he is on it. He's always been one for these niche picks that only he plays too. I do think Kennen is really strong. I think Irelia is slightly better because it's more versatile and you don't have to build a team around it. So yeah, I think Irelia is overall a better pick against Gnar. In lane, it does really well. In lane swaps, it's kind of iffy, but I would pick Irelia over Gnar. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And Kennen does well in lane swaps because he did pretty well in that game.
Yeah.
And then
he can farm from a distance with his boomerang.
Yeah, and on top of that... Oh, I had it. On top of that, Kennen's been being buffed like consistently over the last PB, like little bug fixes and changes, so I wouldn't be surprised if he made a re-entrance, especially since like we have lockdown mages like Lissandra being played up top. I think he could be an alternative flavor of that. Okay, so... all right, McGib, how many more questions do you have? Because I'll let you have like 2 in a row if you got them.
I only have one question.
All right, then final question.
It's back to the pick ban phase. It's about Unicorns of Love, mid laner, Power of Evil. Do you think that SK forced him onto the Syndra because of the bans that Unicorns of Love did with the Zed, the Lissandra, and the Zir? Do you think that they could have had better, maybe different bans, or were they expecting that SK would first pick the Gnar, and so they were surprised by the counter pick of Kennen?
Um, I think they were expecting the Rek'Sai first pick. What I don't think they did is adapt over time. I think they came into this game going, yeah, Power Beagle's going to have to carry on Syndra. We're scared of SK. We got to do this. This is his best champion. And they didn't really adapt. Like, I think Orianna would have been a much stronger pick because it can help with the lockdown and can help keep people into the Narvan combo. I think it works better compositionally, but I think they were just kind of scared and they didn't know what to do at that point, to be completely honest. Like, it's hard to put emotions into the factor, but they are a major factor that goes into competitive games.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that was just not knowing what to do because they were a little bit scared.
Mm-hmm. Plus, Unicorns of Love kind of gimps themselves with Power of Eagle's effective champion pool.
Yeah.
With it, because his Orianna play was god-awful in the one.
Yeah, I would have liked to see him play that again. See if it's just that was just a one-time thing, or if he's actually like terrible.
Bad on that staple pick. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we have no more questions, no more articles to bring on up. So this is the closing moments of the show. We're just barely running over an hour, which I think is great time for 3 articles. So with this show, a couple shout outs. So thank you to McGib, thank you to TeeKhay for coming on. For any Go Pretend content creators interested in joining the show, I kind of just arbitrarily set it up myself. However, if you want a shot at getting into it, write an article. I'll try and find one that has an interesting discussion point, and I'm going to try and vary up the guests like every week. So TeeKhay, McGib, anything. If you guys write a great article, I might mention it within the show, but I don't think I'll have you on as guest unless I'm that dry of guests next week, which I don't see happening. So I'm looking forward to articles this week. Hopefully we're going to get 3 guests next time, and so maybe we'll have another 3 article session or 4, depending on whether or not I bring in an interesting article that I think warrants a discussion. So we can fill in this little middle of the screen thing here, and I have to make another OBS thing. Oh no. Okay, so with that said, thank you for all of you who've watched this, either with the stream or on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Go follow these guys on Twitter. We have at TheMcGib. He's got no profile picture. We don't have the overlay set up to include handles just yet. We just have mine. Again, ego soother here. We'll get those added in for future guests. Thanks to TeeKhay. He's at TeeKhay Legends. TeeKhay Legends, right?
TK's League.
TeeKhay's League. Up on Twitter. You can find the articles there. We'll have the links to the articles, all of them, within the YouTube video chat, as well as some timestamps for review. So anyways, thank you all so much for coming on board. Thank you to my guests. Looking forward to hosting this every week. This is CD-Mangaka and Go Pretend signing off.